Welcome to the shop. Steve here at SKS Props, and in today's video I have part 2 of my Dragonball Saiyan armor series. If you didn't watch part 1, I'll go ahead and put a link up above so you can check that out. But basically it went over all of the fabrication and the clean painting techniques that I used on this particular armor set. In this video, I want to take my original prototype armor and add some battle damage and some cell shading to it. Now both of these armor sets are completely made out of my HD foam, which you can find over at Blick Art Materials. And what's also fantastic is available on my website, I have a free PDF file that you can download and modify in case you want to build your own Saiyan armor. So I want to show you what it takes to battle damage and weather this piece up, so let's go ahead and get started. When it comes to the battle damage, I wanted it planned out, so all the cracks and all the different cutouts were marked onto the foam with a pencil. I went back through the episodes and I found one where Vegeta's armor was damaged before it was destroyed further, and I used that as my reference for this piece. To create all the cel-shaded lines and cracks in the armor, I'm going to be using a heat tool with a detail point. And like I always say, if you're heating or burning foam, you want to make sure to wear your respirator. My heat tool has the ability to change the temperature, but I set it to the highest temp possible. By barely touching the tip of the tool directly to the foam, it will open it up and cauterize it. This is a great way to change the textures and add some three-dimensional volume to this piece. Now around the crack in the armor, I wanted it to look as though he had taken a direct blast. So I scorched the foam with the side of the heat tool, and then I started to burn and melt it with a heat gun. And in the end, the textures that I was able to create looked pretty cool. Just like the clean armor version, I'm going to seal this foam with 2 to 3 light coats of Plasti-Dip. After the Plasti-Dip had been allowed to cure, I'm also going to use the same Valspar flat white that I'd used on the previous version as well. Now because this armor is supposed to be battle damaged and scuffed up, I didn't cover it completely with the spray paint. I actually allowed some of the Plasti-Dip to show through, that way it looked more weathered. This time around I wanted it to match the anime, so for the abdomen, the back, and the straps I'm going to be using some yellow Valspar flat. I used some tape and paper towels to mask off this area so I make sure I don't get any of the yellow on the white that's already laid down. Now it's important that this area has the white dust coating first because that will really help the yellow stand out. I also want to reiterate that this is a flat spray paint, not a semi-gloss, not a gloss. You want it flat because that's going to allow the acrylic paints to stick to it better. The straps in the back were masked off and painted in the same way, and just like the white, I'm allowing some of that darker color to still show through to make it look more worn. To brighten my yellow and give me a good base for additional acrylics, I'm applying FX Amber Sand. Now this paint is pretty thin, so it's not like it's going to fully cover, but it does a decent job to help brighten the yellow that's already there. This same yellow is also applied to the face and the sides of the top straps, making sure to get in between all the individual segments as well. And like I always preach, it's all about the layers. All these different variations add to a more complex look, which is overall more visually interesting. Now it's time to start adding shadows to the yellow parts to give it that cel-shaded look, and to do that I'm going to be using Utrecht brand Yellow Ochre. I mask off and paint areas that would be in the shadow, just like in the anime. And for this process I strongly recommend to bring up the show and then look for those references so you can see exactly where those colors change. This same yellow ochre is applied in between the ribs and to the opposite side as well. Now when you're applying this paint, you want to make sure that it's fairly thick, because if it's too runny, it'll actually get underneath the tape and you won't get a clean line. And to give it an extra dimension, I even added an angled shadow to the bottom of the ribs. Since I had put a shadow at the bottom, I figured I might as well highlight the top of all the ribs. So the top of each rib was masked off and a little bit of cadmium yellow was applied. To highlight the yellow areas as though they are reflective, I'm using Utrecht brand titanium white. Like I had mentioned before, you want to replicate the attributes of the anime. So I once again use my masking tape and paint exactly where this highlight is going to go. Honestly, every time I'm pulling this tape away, I'm getting even happier with how this is coming out. My entire goal for this armor is to really make it look as though it's popped right off the screen. From time to time, your lines may not come out perfect, so you could always try to repaint it or use a detail brush to clean it up. Just like the anime, the white is shadowed with a light blue, and to replicate that, I'm going to be using FX brand Aquarius. The masking tape is cut and applied to match the shapes that I need. And one thing I should note is that you don't want a masking tape that's incredibly strong. Try to find one that has just enough tack to work, but it won't rip off the paint job underneath. Now because of the light sources and the shadows, I don't want this to match exactly on either side. I want it to be close, but I'm always taking into consideration where the strongest light source would be. This process is starting to look really good, and you can see how just a little bit of paint can start to give this armor some really cool dimensions. Now a lot of the masking I did was pretty straight, so I went back with a detail brush to round over some of the edges. That same detail brush was also used to outline around the cracks and the creases. To give the armor that bold, cartoony outline, I'm going to be using Liquitex Mars Black. I did thin this paint down some just so it would flow a little bit better. And using a detail brush, it was applied within all the battle damage cracks. When it came to outlining the armor, I switched over to a liner brush and added a little bit more water, once again to help it flow better. This black paint was applied to the outside of all the different armor segments, just like you were outlining the different parts for a cartoon. Now this process did take a long time, and it takes a very steady hand to do it. But with enough practice, you should be able to outline and cel shade your armor just like mine. Even while I'm painting that, I continually put down my brush and step back and take a look at the armor. And that's because I'm so happy with how this looks. I really feel that I've captured the replication of making this armor look as though it came right out of the anime. So you can see the steps that I took to battle damage and cell shade this set of Dragon Ball Saiyan armor. Now that goes great with the original clean set that I did, so it gives you two different options for the exact same pattern. And again, that pattern is absolutely free and you can download that directly from my website. And if you are building any of my builds or using HD foam, be sure to tag me at SKS Props on Twitter and Instagram because I want to see your creations. Until next time, build your best with the best. HD Foam.